Anas Alkassem has just returned from Gaza. He's a trauma surgeon and co-founder of the Union of Medical Care and Relief Organisations and vice chairman of the group's organisation there in Canada. He joins us this hour from Toronto. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
So you're in Khan Yunis for 2 weeks. That's a long way from a hospital in Hamilton in Canada to one of the last functioning hospitals in Gaza. Was it as bad as you expected? Was it worse? Because this isn't your first rodeo. You've done war zones before. You spent time in hospitals in Syria.
I think it is worse than what I expected, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been in Syria, I've been in Aleppo. There has been bombardment even on hospitals. I worked in a basement when the building was bombarded. But the intensity of the airstrikes, the highly populated area of Gaza being, 4 by 10 kilometers, being bombarded on a daily basis with some bombs. I'm hearing 1,000 kilogram. I think I've seen way more injuries than what I've seen in Syria. Particularly, we're talking within 3 months. That's quite intense.
And a lot of those who are wounded are children. Tens of thousands, in fact, of children in Gaza have either been killed or wounded during this war. You treated a lot of those wounded kids. You also had some really tough choices to make about who received attention and who did not. So how did you make that call? And now that you're back home and you have a moment to look back and to breathe, have you questioned those decisions at all? Do you have flashbacks to those moments?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is probably one of the most difficult decisions that you have to make as a physician and as a surgeon. Because when we receive, for instance, in Khan Yunis Hospital, the Nasser Hospital, we were pretty close from where the finding apparently is, a few hundred meters, because you hear the bombardment all the time. You hear the tanks, the airstrikes, the drone 24 hours on top of us. But when you get, 15 injuries, I was counting 7 or 8 are children. And then you have to make difficult decisions because you have so limited medical supplies, limited, humanitarian staff with you. We were only 6 surgeons from US and Canada. So you have to decide who's going to probably go to the OR and who is going to be left behind. Although in an ideal situation, probably you would be able to save everyone. You would call in Canada, US, a second or a third team, but you don't have that kind of luxury, thing. And so you have to decide who you're going to be saving and who has to be left behind, unfortunately.
Well, Sean Casey, who coordinates emergency medical teams for the World Health Organization, is in Gaza right now. On Sunday, he visited the Shifa Hospital in Gaza City.
The hospital director just spoke to us, and he said his one request is that this hospital be protected. Even though many of his staff have left, even though this hospital is under enormous pressure, the one request that the hospital director said is that the international community needs to make sure that this hospital and other hospitals like it stay protected, that they not get struck, that they not get evacuated.
The one consistency about Gaza right now seems to be whatever the chaos and death and destruction might be on any given day, the next day will almost certainly be worse. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I certainly agree with the UN statement that the hospitals need to be protected. But unfortunately, it hasn't been the case. Al-Shifa Hospital, Indonesian Hospital, Kamal Adwan Hospital, the Rentisi Hospital were either bombarded or surrounded by tanks. And then the patients, we heard some horrible stories by the physicians who left the Al-Shifa Hospital to the southern Gaza. They had to evacuate the hospital with a lot of injuries, with a lot of patients that they had to walk on their feet to South Gaza. And unfortunately, the largest hospitals in northern Gaza are not functioning at the current time.
We keep hearing about Gaza's health system being on the verge of collapse and the difficulties which they're enduring. But I guess if you compare treatment and care which most people receive in developed countries, Canada, Australia, United States, wherever, would you say Gaza's health system really has already collapsed?
Yeah, I mean, to start with, the healthcare system was not probably the best because of the siege on Gaza for years, right? And before that, there's an occupation on Gaza from 1967. But then even after that, it never picked up, it never became, an advanced healthcare system, if you will. But with this war, it was at the verge of collapsing, and 100% it did collapse. I can see that in even southern Gaza, with the two major hospitals in Khan Yunis, that we have major lack of equipment, of medical supplies, CT scan machine, and things like that, let alone the lack of drugs, analgesia, antibiotics. I had to do stitches without analgesia in the ER because we want to save the analgesia for the major surgeries in the OR. So certainly it has collapsed, and we witnessed that during the 2 weeks that we visited Gaza.
Dr. Anas Alkassem there, we appreciate your time, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.